Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Zach Hampson and today I'm going to talk to you about how we can paint from a blurry reference photo. So I've done it, you've done it, I'm sure we've all done it. We've gone out, taken a bunch of photos, trying to get that perfect shot, and then we come back to the studio and we realize that all of our photos are blurry and I can't read any information out of any of the photos I took. More along the lines of what usually happens to me, I'm just watching a video on YouTube and I see just one flash second of this landscape or whatever scene and I love it and I think that's amazing. I take a screenshot of it and it's just, you know, the video's not that good of quality, it's really blurry, the screenshot quality downgrades it again, it's just really blurry. I don't get all the information that I need out of it and definitely not enough to make a painting from. Well, usually there's enough to make a painting from, but I'll talk about that later. But most of the time it's just super blurry and I get no information out of it and I can't paint from it. So what do you do? So in this case, I'm going to look on my computer right now. I'm going to show you exactly what it was that I was watching when I saw this image flash across the screen and I wanted to paint from it. So I was watching one of Richard Musgrave Evans' videos and it was, which one was it? This one here. It was this video here, and actually I'll take it back a second. Richard is an amazing painter and he makes phenomenal videos. I mean, you can see, look at that already, like how awesome is that landscape. Now, I'm going to try and pause it where I really liked it. How about there? So that right there was the one image that captivated me so much that I really wanted to paint a picture from it. And as you can see, it's not the highest quality image. I mean, you get a sense of everything that's there. I mean, you can tell there's the mountains in the background, there's the trees in the foreground, you can tell that there's just some shrubs, some broken off branches, some fallen trees in the foreground there. You can tell in the midground there's more shrubs and stuff like that. But you know, when it comes to really fleshing out a painting, bringing that to like a finished piece, there's not a lot to work with. And so, what do? So, first of all, what I did was I just took a screenshot of it, saved it to my desktop, and I started drawing. Didn't capture the drawing process of the painting that's going to be the focus of this video, but just to give you an idea, my drawing process kind of starts out much like this. This is another painting that I'm about to work on. Much the same, really. It's just lots of big shapes, all drawn up with charcoal. And that's the main focus that you want to do. When you're left with an image that's out of focus or a bit blurry, you're going to have to start imagining what's really there. And so by doing that, what I did was, I'll bring you to the real painting here, is I started drawing up what I thought would be in the foreground from what I could see in the blurry image. And so what I could see was lots of different shrubs, lots of different bits and pieces of fallen trees, bits of like branches and stuff all along the ground. And so to render that out, I just drew up what I thought was in front of me, and then I started just to apply some paint. And because I can't see all the details, it's really going to leave it up to your imagination to how the finished painting is going to come into its own. Now that I've got my reference photo, it's a bit blurry, I've filled in those gaps between the blur and the finished photo with my imagination and some sketching up on the panel, on the canvas, and now it's time to get into some painting. And so why don't we just jump into that and I start talking over the top of that and explain the process of what's happening before you. Alright, let's get stuck into this painting. So like every good painting that I paint, well, like any painting that I paint, I start with the background first and I work my way forward. How I do that, I'm just working on the sky first, so that's the furthest thing away from me to the closest thing. See, I just mixed up some light blue there to dab into the background. I'm going to throw up my reference photo there, just so you can see some comparisons between the reference photo and my drawing as well. So you can see how that reference photo, you know, still a bit blurry. I've come in with that drawing and just mapped out a lot of the things that I want to get out of this painting and just mapped out the bare essentials. You don't need to draw up too much. You just want to draw up enough that you've got enough to work from on your painting. And then all the while, it doesn't mean that I abandon the reference photo at all. By no means. I definitely need that for the colors mixing and all that good stuff. I definitely need that reference photo. You can see I'm just mixing up some of that deeper bluer sky as the sky reaches up into its higher part there. And then for that lower part there, you see I left that blank, and that's for a good reason, because that bottom part of that sky is actually a bit more yellow, a bit more whitewashed yellow, where that sun is just rising. It's just hitting that lower atmosphere there. You can see that just above the horizon line of those mountains in the background there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm not going to put it into that blue, otherwise I'll just make it pretty much green, a green sort of haze, which the sky does turn, but not this sky that I want to paint. You see I just lightly put it on and separated from the blue, and now I'm going back with a cleaner brush and putting that blue just a little bit into that white there, so it makes this nice gradient into that blue. There's a nice faded gradient at that as well. And I don't think I come back and touch up the sky again in this whole painting process, but I think I was happy enough with it when I did that. I thought I captured it pretty well there. You know, the sky's not the hardest thing you're going to paint in your painting career, that's for sure. I mean, well, if you've got massive clouds and stuff, that makes sense, I suppose. But anyways, getting off track. Back to it. See these colors I've mixed up here? They're all a bit washed with white. They got all bits of white through them, and the reason for that is because I'm working on the mountain range in the background there. And so the reason why it's all washed a little bit with that white is because that atmospheric perspective is going to turn those colors less saturated. There's going to be a lot more atmosphere between me, the viewer, and those mountains in the background there. So I've given them all a nice wash of white through them all, so that it doesn't so it's not as saturated as the colors in the foreground are going to be. It's not as demanding, as hard hitting as the colors in the foreground are going to be, because if I made that darkest dark in those mountain ranges as dark as what my foreground dark is going to be, then there's going to be a little bit of discrepancy between for the viewer to not try and work out between what's in the foreground, what's in the background, you know, what's closest to me, what's not closest to me, you know. And having those nice subtle hue shifts into a bit more paler colors really helps give that illusion of atmospheric perspective. And you can see, like normal, I'm putting in my darkest darks in first, and then working my way through to those lightest lights, those nice vibrant oranges that you're going to see there. I've got nice bit of like purple in there, nice bit of oranges through there. It's really beautiful mountain range. I think that's what really captured my attention first off for this photo. When I first saw it, it was that beautiful mountain range in the background there. It was just killer, and I just knew I wanted to paint that. You can see that I actually left a few speckles of blue through where the tree is going to be. Reason for that is it's a lot harder to paint a sky through leaves than it is to paint leaves over a sky. It is, and it also looks a bit funny if you do it that other way too. Yeah, so that's the reason why there's a bit of blue through there. You can see I'm still using that longer, small flat, and I'm going to use that long, small flat for pretty much the rest of this initial block-in layer. And it's just really good because I can get nice consistent brush strokes down over my piece and cover a lot more area than I would be able to with like a smaller round, say. So this really helpful tool to use when you're in your first blocking stage. And the blocking stage just means, like, because I paint in layers, this blocking stage is just a nice foundational layer where I can build upon and have a good foundation to come back in those second layers and really get that vibrancy, get more detail into the shot, etc., etc. So you can see I'm here. I've mixed up a few more these grayer, earthier tones, and the reason for that is I'm about to work on that foreground. You can see a little bit of that painting there. As you see, I've already touched into it a little bit, but that foreground is what I'm going to be working on right now. I've mixed up just those nice earthy tones, and because they are in shadow, I've put a lot of blue through all of them as well, so that they're not as bright and as vibrant and saturated, because the light is a real key aspect to this piece, and I want to make sure that I really nail that shadow and lights overall throughout this whole piece. You can see I'm working in darkest things to lightest things again. That's just how I like to work. I feel like it works really well for me. And I'm working on a lot of those bushes and those shrubs here in the foreground and that midground there. Really mapping out what it is I'm gonna want the viewer to see in this foreground, because if you remember from our reference photo, it's really quite blurry. There's a bit of information there that let us know that there's a lot of shrubs, a lot of fallen trees, a lot of fallen branches, etc., etc., in the foreground and midground. But it really, when it comes to finer details, it's not going to help us when we come to that stage. And so that drawing process that you saw before, the underdrawing that you saw before is really great map for what I had in mind to put down. And then the way I'm approaching the canvas now is really awesome and the way that I'm approaching the shrubs now is really great to map out exactly what it is that I want the viewer to see here in the foreground. I'm coming into that lighter background now. Well, that midground, I suppose, the real key of this whole painting is this nice little bit of strip of light across the midground there, which is another aspect which really drew me to painting this scene, because it just had this one little fine strip where the sunlight has just come over the mountain range, has just hit this little bit of land, and that's what I really wanted to try and capture overall. It's just that play of light between that little fine bit of sunlight coming in and the rest of the shadows that haven't been touched yet. Anyways, you can see me mixing up some of the colors that I'm going to use for the second layer. So I'm into the second painting stage right now. I'm about to go work onto that background of the mountain range. You can see my colors are a lot more vibrant. Still got that nice wash from it, but they're a bit more accurate to what the colors are in the reference photo than it is in the first block in layer. And yeah, another thing to mention, I suppose, is the first block in layer. It doesn't have to be exactly one for one. The colors have to be matching or anything like that. It's just a block in layer. You can do it black and white if you really want to, but yeah. So the second layer though is where I really want to focus and knuckle down on getting those colors correct. Another thing to mention is that I'm using a round now. I'm using a smaller round, and that's the kind of round that I'm going to be using for the rest of this second painting stage, because it just gives me a bit more detail and a bit more smaller brush strokes to work in some of those finer areas that I want to bring forth to the viewer. You can see I'm adding in those nice little bits of blue, making it a bit more vibrant on that mountain range, giving it a bit more texture, giving the viewer a bit more sense of what is in that background mountain range there, so that you can really, it gives an illusion of a lot of things happening, but really when you get up close it's just a bunch of dots and dashes, I suppose. Well, I suppose you could say about any sort of painting, but this one in particular, that's for sure. Working in those shadows in the background there so I can get those nice finer details, and having that smaller brush really helps with those finer details, that's for sure. And now working into that nice bit of strip of light color, working furthest thing away to closest like normal, so the next thing up is just this nice strip of light in that midground there, and having that smaller brush really helps put in those finer details, whereas having that long flat really just emphasize the color. It was helpful to get all that color down and just put down those forms really blockily. But coming in with this smaller round here is really going to be what's key to emphasizing to the viewer that this is just a bunch of shrubs that have just been the first things of the landscape to get that morning sunlight. And so I think that's really cool to be able to flesh that out and bring that forth to the viewer, for the viewer to see. And another thing to mention while I'm painting up this bit is that I really wanted to bring my brushstroke into a more, how would you say, impressionistic sort of form. which really helps because my reference photo isn't exactly the clearest photo on earth, which is hence the whole point of this video. And so having that nicer impressionistic sort of stroke to everything is going to help me get away with using a blurry reference photo as well. But yeah, you can see me coming in, tidying up a lot of those shrubs in the foreground, adding some little bits of highlight, making sure that it's not too light though, because remember these shrubs are still in shadow here, and so I really don't want my lightest value in the shadows here to be as light as my lightest value in the highlights in the sunlight. That's going to really mess up your painting and really mess with your ability to see the atmosphere and see what's closest to you and furthest away, as well as play with things that are in shadow, things that aren't. It's going to really mess up that contrast if you hit that lightest thing in the shadow matches that lightest thing in the light. So make sure that your shadows are dark and stay around that dark value range. And so that's what I try to do here. Make sure everything has a tinge of blue, lots of black and stuff like that. And even my greens, I want to keep those greens really bluey, because a lot of shadows really are just different sort of shades of blue when you really get down to it, especially in landscapes. Alright, moving into this tree now, up in this branch. I noticed that my tree wasn't as big and as bushy as it was in the reference photo. I knew that painting it up in the blocking stage, but coming into the second stage I really realized that it just wasn't as big and as bushy as I really wanted it to be, and so I really stretched this tree out a bunch more, give a real sense that the sky is coming through it. That's another thing about painting in the sky first, is that you can paint over the top of it and get that nice sky coming through those leaves instead of painting sky through leaves, like I said earlier. Coming into that top of the tree there, add in some of those nice little fine highlights is really satisfying to do, especially after taking a while, especially coming into the ending phase of a painting, really is what I mean to say. It's always satisfying to put down those lightest lights and those final touches and final touch-ups before your painting is finished. That is the end of this video. I hope you all really enjoyed this entire video process. I hope you were able to gain a lot of insight and a lot of beneficial knowledge that you can bring into your own art practice. If you like this video, please hit like, hit subscribe. When you hit subscribe, hit that bell, that'd be awesome. I really also appreciate a bunch of feedback down in the comments below, so I can make better videos going forward in the future. Other than that, I'll see you all next time.